Star Trek Discovery deserves more credit for saving the
Oh, shut
franchise.
the up.
Oh,
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's time to get angry. I didn't have a 10 thing list this week, but I had this one. Like, oh, this will be good. Nearly 60 years after its debut, Star Trek is thriving as a franchise. That's a funny joke.
Is this revenge for labeling you the red shirt? Because that honestly was Horny Alf's idea. I'm just saying.
I know. Well, no, there's no revenge on that. I wear that with a badge of pride, or my clones do. I'm alive and well. Anyway, but none of this would be possible without the USS Discovery and Mikey Burnham. Wow. Joshua M. Patton. God, I hope you're not related to the great general. God, I hope you're not. Because he would be turning in his grave to hear you say something.
Yeah, Adam, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go eat a bottle of rat poison.
Okay. Just time
Share.
it.
Share.
It's the collective intransigence of the studios forced by the strikes. The annual Star Trek Vegas convention was a little different in 2023. While still a celebration, the cast of Discovery was prevented from talking about the show's upcoming canceled final season.
It was canceled because it sucks and no one was watching it.
Canceled. It's not successful. Never has been. On its debut, Discovery wasn't warmly received by some fans, has never been warmly received. Disco fans are not fans. They're disco fans. They have STD.
Stop calling it disco. That's their word. It's STD.
Oh, really? Okay, STD. Well, I thought that calling him disco was making fun of them. I don't know. I wouldn't know.
No, they love that shit.
Oh, they do. Okay, then I apologize.
But it does open up to the joke that with this upcoming cancellation and all, that disco is in fact dead.
Okay, wait. Thank you for saving me there. But
Disco's
the show
never dead.
The show
love the Bee Gees.
Shut up, devil.
For saving the Star Trek franchise from Hollywood oblivion. Oh my god. Okay, that is so stupid because Star Trek would have benefited from being quiet for another decade.
They could have never made another episode again, and all of the content that had been made up to that point was evergreen.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
People would continue to go back and watch it. We continue to introduce new generations to it.
We're proof of that every Sunday right now.
Yeah, it might have become more of a cult thing given over time, but it would have survived.
But I mean, and it survived its cool down period from in the early to late 80s when there was just the TOS movies. But then that was enough of a cool down period where people were ready when TNG was introduced. They were receptive because also it was the smart to do a time skip. Forward, not backwards, like freaking STD. And you had a chance, and then it was a whole new story and a whole new adventure. And then, of course, the success gave us DS9 and Voyager, and to an extent, Enterprise. This has done nothing but sink the franchise. Like every other franchise has been poisoned by lack of talent. So, no, it did not save Oblivion. It would have benefited because it would have been a cool down period to get us past this shit, and it would have been poisoned. More than half a century since Roddenberry's Wagon Train to the Stars debuted, Star Trek isn't just still around, it's thriving. In the 2020s, Discovery, Prodigy, Picard, Strange New Worlds, and Lower Decks were all in production at the same time. Oh my God.
It's thriving in the same way that the Black Plague thrived throughout Europe.
Yeah, it's spreading this disease. The only thing, and let's be honest, 2/3 of Picard is dog shit.
Yep.
It's complete and utter dog shit. It's the third season where they didn't care, and I say it from their direction, they mistakenly and unknowingly allowed a real Star Trek fan who has the ability to make good television be given the reins.
Not just a real Star Trek fan. I mean, worked on Enterprise and Voyager.
And didn't you do a little DS9 too?
No, I think he came up under Ira Steven Bear, but I don't think he
Yeah.
actually did much more than fetch coffee on Deep Space Nine. But
Hey,
he was given more leeway on Voyager, and then they asked him to come in and start, like, taking some heavy responsibility with Enterprise.
but he watched and learned.
Oh yeah,
Because Ira Steven Bear he's my favorite of that era because I thought his decisions on DS9 were great. I mean, it was all good stuff. And now imagine though, now we are able. Did you ever think you would go, man? I miss Brandon Braga. Imagine saying that. Wow.
There was a time when the names of a lot of the producers and showrunners, obviously Roddenberry, everybody knew who Roddenberry was, but in a lot of cases, people had no idea who they were if their faces weren't on screen.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to go back to that time because that means they were doing their jobs right.
Yep.
Now we all know their names and they're all out there giving their opinions about this and saying things about that and making shit shows.
Yep.
And we all know that's what they're doing because they spend more time being like pseudo celebrities than they are being producers and writers and what have you, crew members. Well, to be fair, a lot of the crew members are just people who are coming to work and doing their jobs. But even the actors, you didn't really know the actors. You just know, hey, this person plays this character. I really like this character, and that was the end of it. I miss those days. The only reason I know who Ira Steven Bear is because I looked it up after the fact. Deep Space Nine started when I was in my teens. I didn't care about who was producing it.
Yeah.
I didn't care about who was writing it. I just wanted to see my characters come onto the screen.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was at the time. It's only later when, as I got older and I'm watching all this stuff over and over again, and I'm paying attention to who directed an episode, who wrote an episode, who's the producers, who's the showrunner. It's then I'm realizing, okay, this is the guy that's in charge. Okay, I like what he's doing. And if I see his name attached to this, I know it's going to be good. So you're exactly right. You learn the names, but then you just know their names when it's attached to a good product. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, but all these shows.
Did you watch that documentary, What We Left Behind?
No.
You should.
Okay.
Check it out. I don't know if it's free, but I know it's available on YouTube. I think it's on Amazon Prime. Basically, it's a documentary follows around Ira Steven Bear and Associates, talking about all the things that went into Deep Space Nine, and at a certain point during it, a bunch of the old writers' room gets back together, including what the hell was the name of the guy who rebooted Battlestar? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I know who it is. I forget his name too because he worked on TNG. Yeah, because he worked on TNG. That's where he.
Yeah, and he also was he was also in the writers' room for most of Deep Space Nine. In fact, BSG is basically what he wanted to do with Deep Space Nine, but he didn't have total control. And they get back together and they write another episode. Like in the documentary. Like obviously it's never going to get filmed or anything, but just to kind of get their hats back into it. And it's a very good documentary. Very cool.
Thank you, Agent Dale Cooper. Ronald D. Moore. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to remember his acronym, but I kept going Russell T. Davies, RTD. No, that's not it. That's
Yeah, it was Ron Moore. Thank you guys. So they get it's a very good documentary. It's very nostalgic. And it's nostalgic from the showrunner and the writer's points of view. There's a lot of other stuff in there too, like Terry Farrell, I think, is in it at one point talking about all the stuff that led to her firing. They get a bunch of cast and crew together to talk about things. And I think this was made before Aaron Eisenberg passed, so he might be in it too. But definitely check it out.
Okay, I mean, I need a lot of reminding and prodding to do that kind of stuff. So keep pushing me going forward because I will memory hold it. I promise you, I'm going to memory hold it. I will not lie. It'll get memory hold. But we got all this. So they listed, and these are all horrible. And I would wager something like Lower Decks it's a mockery of Star Trek. It's a disgusting mockery of it. But anyway, so we're all and there are people out there, the STDers are going to say, this is peak Star Trek. Look at all these things. I mean, here's the thing. Tell me, correct me wrong, isn't Prodigy wasn't even a Star Trek property? They rebranded it and made it Star Trek. It was something else. I believe I remember hearing that. Well, all right. Never had there been so many active Star Trek projects at once. Not too shabby for the franchise pushing 60 years old. No, I'd rather go back when you kind of had them just slightly overlapping. When you maybe had a
Well,
movie and the
there was a
show.
reason they were doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they weren't trying to oversaturate the market with their IP. They wanted people to pay attention, to be involved, to be invested. This is just like the Disney Plus MCU crap. It's all over the fucking
Yep.
place, and it's
Yeah.
impossible to follow.
I mean,
Yep.
it's one thing to be like, okay, I've got an episode of TNG, and oh, look, I got another episode of DS9 this week. Okay, TNG is clearly winding down. We're in the final seasons. DS9's getting started. Let's rock and roll. And then DS9's winding down. Okay, now I got Voyager. Great. And I got a movie in here once in a while. But it was, like you said, balanced, not saturated.
Well, and
now it's
when
in your
when they
face.
did overlap, though, they were tied in, but loosely, so that they could each be their own thing. Like Deep Space Nine ties into TNG via the Battle of Wolf 359, right? And then later they reintroduce Worf after O'Brien comes on, he gets transferred and all that stuff. And then when Voyager happens, they overlap with Deep Space Nine because it's tying into the whole Maquis thing, which but then it goes off and it becomes its own thing.
Yeah, and because TNG and DS9 because Enterprise is in the premiere episode, it's docked at DS9, and you get a brief moment with Picard and Cisco. Point is, there were even a couple of crossover episodes here and there while they were still airing at the same time, especially the whole Data with the Dream episodes.
I think there's even one with Thomas Riker at one point.
Yeah, Tom Riker. Yeah, Tom. That's season 2, I think.
Yeah, loops into the Maquis too.
Yeah, and that ties up the Tom Riker story arc for him because he's in jail, probably still in jail, maybe even dead. Who knows? Not too shabby of a franchise pushing 60 years old. In fact, season 3 of Picard, both seasons of Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks are all generally beloved. Lies.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, our own Rastercaster likes Strange New Worlds, or at least he did until the singing episode. And nobody likes Lower Decks. Nobody likes it. And we all really enjoyed Picard season 3, but we know what it was. It was the love letter. It was the I'm sorry. And it was the let's give this the proper goodbye it deserved.
The first time I heard anybody like nicely talk about new Star Trek was the Picard season 3. Every other thing, the only people who are talking about it with any reverence was media. Every single person was like, no, it's shit and I don't like it. It's just media.
Yeah.
No one else liked it. It's bullshit.
No. Yep.
I know a bunch of Trekkies in my life, bunches of them, normies, most of them, aside from like loving Star Trek. A lot of the, they're not into like YouTube or entertainment commentary spheres or anything like that, so they don't hear about a lot of this stuff. The ones who do know that Lower Decks exists don't know anything about it. And they don't because none of this stuff was advertised. First of all,
it's all advertised on streaming.
Yeah,
and
which
or
if you don't have Paramount Plus, and they just and the ones who do know anything about it aren't fucking interested. They're like, I didn't sign up for that. I remember the last time they tried to do an animated Star Trek in the 70s, and it was shit.
Similarly, no one who's watched an episode of Prodigy has a negative. Everybody I've heard Prodigy has a negative. They all say negative things. Only you say positive things because you're fucking chills. Everybody hates it because it's retarded. I mean, I'm not the biggest Kathy fan in the world. I like her earlier on than I do later on in Voyager, but this show does her dirty, from what I understand. Prodigy does Kathy Janeway dirty. It's terrible.
See, I don't like Janeway at all, but they still shouldn't be fucking with old school canon.
Yeah, I like her before she starts just leaving a wake of destruction throughout the Delta Quadrant.
I liked her when she was a giant salamander banging Tom Paris.
That is funny. Hey, Warp 10, a price comes for Warp 10, okay? Price comes for it. However, Discovery was not so lucky because the series dared to do something different. for Star Trek. At the very least, it helped remind reluctant fans of the fact that what they wanted from the franchise was something more familiar. The series and its characters are quintessential Star Trek, deserving of respect on merits alone.
Shut
Yet
your bitch
even the
mouth.
most recalcitrant fan has to admit that without Star Trek Discovery, the franchise may have died after Star Trek Beyond failed to make money. Okay, that's a lot to dissect. First of all, Star Trek Beyond is the Kelvin timeline. Nobody likes the Kelvin timeline. We don't care about it. We wanted it to fail. We wanted it to fail so we could get away from it. Understand that. 2, and I've only watched reviews of STD seasons 1 and 2, because then the guys I watched stopped reviewing it for season 3 and 4, or partway through season 3, and didn't touch 4. Except I do know about Planet Earth, Stacey Abrams. I know about that. I mean,
Stacey
Samuel
Abrams placed Planet Earth in the show.
She was Planet Earth.
President Earth, Planet Earth, tomato.
Whatever. She's fat. She's fat.
She's just seen there floating in air with the continents taped on her.
And
well, I mean, budget issues, right?
Yeah. And those teeth, just big enough space to fly all of Starfleet through. I got no shame.
Yeah.
No
Her
shame.
head's like Luna Station.
She is so hyped up
Now-
for somebody who just keeps failing.
I know. I mean, perennial failure. Now, Samuel could speak to more on the details of STD than I can, but to say that these characters are worth merit, that they reserve respect on their merits. No, they're a bunch of crybaby, unprofessional morons, and Mikey Burnham is perhaps one of the worst characters ever created for television.
The only character I didn't watch past season 2. Most of what I remember about season 2 involved Michael Burnham's estranged or absentee mom or whatever, and an Iron Man suit that for some
I know
reason
about
is in
that.
the franchise now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Spock's dyslexic and all of his problems stem from
He's her stepbrother.
being. Yeah, well, that's not why though. Her being his stepbrother, and which is first of all, that's a misnomer. She's a ward of Sarek and Amanda, not their actual kids. So that whole stepbrother thing, that's a bit of a stretch. But she's credited with being the only reason his dyslexia and his identity crisis due to being half folk and half human didn't rip him apart.
Oh, God.
And it's just, but that's really all I remember from
That's
season
enough.
2.
That's
Season
enough.
1, the only character that was worth a damn from season 1 was Captain Lorca, the white guy, who, as it turns out, was from the mirror universe. And
I
not
know
a good
that.
dude.
I didn't watch past episode 1. I watched the free one, and then I said, I'm not paying for that shit.
I never
Played
even
by
watched
Jason
it.
Isaacs.
Yeah, Jason Isaacs, good actor. I never watched it because once I heard prequel, I was out. I was out of the word prequel. It's like, why are we going backwards in time? Why am I not going forwards? And why are we doing another thing set in an era where all the great stories have been told?
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing is like, this is the era that it's set in is between Enterprise and TOS.
Yeah.
Right. In that kind of nebulous exploratory, where the Federation's really gaining ground as a power, in the galaxy, kind of time, which is fine. I mean, I guess it's like we all know where that ends up. It ends up with Kirk and McCoy and Spock, but it's kind of in that time. Like the Enterprise takes place like 100 years before Kirk and Spock, but
yeah,
I don't have a problem with prequels per se. I have a problem with prequels that completely dismantle and rewrite everything that comes after it, and then they're just like, oh, we're just going to memory hold that this ever happened.
Yeah,
that's the problem of that. Oh, sorry, Devil, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say exactly. If you're gonna do a prequel, you have to go into it knowing you have a set defined parameters to you to not interfere with your original series or the original and stuff, the canon of it. And none of these studios respect that. None of them do. Every single time they do a prequel, they just shit on what came before it and say, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna change it because who gives a shit?" And then they're their jaw hits the floor when they get backlash because of that. It's so I'm tired of it.
It is. And that's exactly what happens though at the end of season 2, right? The Discovery and crew leap like 9,000 years into the future to get away from a not Borg threat. That's totally the Borg, but they can't use it because obviously that would fuck up the timeline even more. And everybody who's left behind who knows about that ship's existence, right? Which is Spock, Amanda Grayson, Sarek, handful of other people. All of them just take a solemn promise never to speak about it again.
But here's the thing. Like Devil said, they have no respect for it because they hate it. They hate the material, so they are perfectly happy to deconstruct it and ruin it and put their own stamp on it because they have to modernize it. And then at the same time, again, I've said this before. This is not new information. I don't like prequels because to me, when it's a prequel, there are no stakes. We know where everything's going. The only thing I might like a prequel is maybe if we're getting something that's going to show us the details of a famous historical moment in that franchise, like Revenge of the Sith. Let's see the fall of Anakin. Let's see Mustafar. I was hoping we were going to, and I hoping we would see the actual Jedi purges, but we didn't get that. That's a different story, different. But I'm okay with that. But I don't want to see a prequel jammed into a period of time where whatever conflict you concoct has no stakes because it has to end in victory without too much damage. And just use Star Trek as an example, because Kirk and Spock still have to come around. We're still getting NCC 1701.
Well, I know that people aren't not many people are a fan of Enterprise, but at least it was a prequel that did right because they fit stuff into the original thing. Like they show how in the original the Klingons look so different. Remember Worf and the push one, and he's all we don't talk about it. In Enterprise, they explain why that happened, how that happened. It makes a connection that actually helped the overall story and stuff. That's the way you should do prequels, is trying to use this as an opportunity to lead into questions people had from the original or to help it out. So I always appreciated Enterprise, but I do see why people dislike it.
I agree with you, Devil. I like Enterprise.
I didn't like the start of it. I got hooked during the Xindi arc. I was in New York. I was in New York. I was at culinary school. And when the weekend hit, I had nothing to do. Because one, I had no money, and two, I didn't know anybody in New York, so I wasn't going out doing shit. But I would chill out. I had a nice Chinese place right across the street from where I was living. I could go in there. I would get some little beef lo mein, some beef fried rice, maybe some beef and broccoli. I'd shuttle back across, and on that night, it was I think it was Friday night, I would get some SG-1, and then Enterprise was coming on, and the Xindi arc was interesting. So I had a nice little double feature that I could sit down and just chill out and eat some Chinese food and have a good evening.
You got your SG-1 with your MSG?
I will kick your ass out of here for that one.
I agree though, man. It's Enterprise. I liked Enterprise from the get. I even like the theme song that they did for it and the entrance. No, look,
a long time.
I didn't say it was good Star Trek theme. I like the theme. I also liked how they showed all the ships that had borne the name of Enterprise throughout history, leading up to where they got to. That was very cool.
Don't talk shit on Rod Stewart. Don't be there. That man's a treasure.
My show, I'll talk all the shit I want.
That mullet is a treasure. But he's But I did like it. But you're right. It was slow, and it was having trouble finding its footing for the first season and a half. I mean, honestly, they kind of all did. But
True.
you know, once they got in a little bit more in depth with the temporal Cold War, which I admit there was so much potential to completely fuck the timeline with that. But I think that they did it right because their whole goal, at least our hero's goal, was to prevent changes to the timeline that would alter things. I mean, you know, like they were trying to keep shit on track as part of the main storyline, and that leads directly into the Xindi conflict, which I think begins in halfway through season 2 or at the beginning of season 3. I forget which.
I think it was season 3 because I wasn't watching in season 2. I just remember they were showing the previews of the attack on Earth.
Right, and that happens at the in the last episode, I think, of season 2.
And that caught my attention because I was Enterprise was on still Paramount Network at this time, right? Or had it?
No, it was on UPN.
Channel? Oh, it was UPN. Well, yeah, UPN. Yeah. That was what Paramount Network became UPN. And somehow I saw the commercial for it while watching something else. And like I said, that the Friday nights became okay. I'm going across the street because I just been in the freaking kitchen all day. It's time for me to chill out. I'm gonna get some Chinese food. I'm watching SG1, and then I'm watching Enterprise because that I saw this attack on Earth. I'm like, whoa, okay, that's something interesting. And now I'm into this, and here they are. They're out in the boonies of space. They have nowhere to go. They have the ship's falling apart. They have no allies. They're doing the best they can, and it was compelling. And that is the point. And it's far back enough. Good. And it's far back enough that it's not infringing on NCC 1701. It's not infringing on it.
Right, and at the beginning of the Xindi arc, they tell you where it's going to end up. The Xindi in canon timeline eventually join the Federation and are staunch allies of Federation races, you know. But they go through this kind of teething period where millions of people get killed, and all that, and it was finding its footing in season 3 and 4. Season 4 is really good, but at that point the numbers had dropped so low because there was so little interest carried over from 1
I checked out right away after Xindi arc. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not interested anymore.
Yeah, so that after seasons 1 and 2, like there just weren't enough people watching to keep it going.
Yeah, and
this was back when ratings meant something.
Yeah, and they tried to say it was Star Trek fatigue, and I've never bought that. I've never been on board with that. I always believed that if they had managed to keep the momentum from the Xindi arc, they could have ended Enterprise instead of with End Program, which we all made fun of. We all made fun of that.
Well, I think they suffered the same fate that Stargate Universe later did. It was I think it was because it was a little too outside of what Trek fans had come to expect.
Yeah,
and that a lot of that is why it failed.
And for me, I always felt the mistake was we haven't continued the pushing the timeline forward, and
again, that's unfortunate because as it turns out, both, and I know there are people who disagree with me on this, but season 2 of Stargate or the second half of season 1, rather, there was one season of Stargate Universe is really good.
No, they got season 2. It was season 2. There was.
Right. Yeah. So it's really
they found
good,
their footing.
And it ends in a great fucking cliffhanger, but you know it wasn't enough to save them. Same thing happened with Enterprise. It got really good, but by then there just weren't enough people watching to save it.
Because I mean, with Universe, I've always felt, and we've talked about this before. They broke the pattern of Stargate storytelling. And they moved away from the certain flavor of what we all expected and wanted. And they managed to get a fresh flavor they found their footing. Like we said, they found their footing in season 2. They managed to actually find a rhythm. But as you said, it was too late. A lot of people were checking out because it wasn't what they wanted. We wanted the next adventure in the Milky Way galaxy, not out on the outer reaches of another rando galaxy.
I don't think it was so much the location as it was the style had changed. They were taking cues from another show at the time that was very successful, BSG.
Yeah.
Right. They were taking cues from a lot of sci-fi at the time was leaning into this grittier, darker, grainy film.
That's why I didn't like BSG. I'm not a BSG
Yeah.
fan. Reboot.
I
I'm
am,
original.
but
No,
it's not the same thing as Stargate. It's not the same thing as Star Trek. It's its own thing, and that had to be taken into account. These the showrunners of SGU were trying to basically capitalize on the success of another franchise's show, which is what came with all the stylistic changes and the it was more
dark,
graphically
but it
violent.
was
It
also
was
visually
sexual.
dark
It
too.
was very much so. I mean, they kind of explain that in the story because like the lights aren't working. It's not that they don't have them; they just don't work, which is fine. But
But
I
it's
think that
not
it turned so
fun.
many people off. Yeah, and it didn't have the same kind of humor in
And
it. It didn't have a Shepherd. It didn't have an O'Neill.
we did have to be honest. That the crew of the Destiny were not likable at all.
Yeah,
Not
I agree.
likable, and that was part of it. There was nobody to latch onto, nobody to root for, and
Well, it
I
was
just
supposed to be Eli. Eli was the everyman. He was the audience. He was the
and no, I'm
audience's
sorry.
eyes.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
it's just no, no. I forgot what I was going to say. So we'll move on to the article. I know. I'm sorry. Uh, click. Oh, wrong side. Stupid. All right. Star Trek always works best as a TV series, and Discovery was its most cinematic. Really? After the United Paramount Network's failure, UPN, brought the end to Enterprise, it seemed like Star Trek had finally run out of dilithium. Oh, shut up. God, that's a terrible joke. The movies included the classic characters from the TOS, yet time travel angle meant these weren't the characters fans knew well. The movies didn't allow for enough time for audiences to fall in love with the new characters, at least not the way a TV series would. So when Discovery was announced, fans wondered if the series would be set in the Kelvin timeline. Instead, it was revealed as part of the Prime timeline, which they have now changed.
Yep.
They have now changed because they always knew it wasn't that. They tried to convince us it was. They tried to get us on board with that. And I mean, if this had been successful, it would be the Prime timeline. They wouldn't have changed that.
Oh yeah.
If it
the only part of that gets me, and this is just like nerd nitpicking, really, is that the Kelvin timeline happened when the USS Kelvin went back and did its thing with the Narada, or the Narada went back and did its thing with the USS Kelvin and changed
yeah.
the course of history from that point forward. This takes place before that.
Mm-hmm. So yes, it requires somebody knowing that to let us know that. I have memory hold, and that's rare for me. Most of that first Jar Jar movie, because I didn't I hated it, and I realized it isn't Star Trek. It's just it would have been fine. It's
Well,
just some rando sci-fi movie.
But this didn't happen before the Calvin timeline broke, right? Because when it broke, Kirk was just born. In this, by the time Strange New Worlds, Kirk is a young man. So wouldn't this be in between when the Calvin timeline did the break and Kirk coming on? I
Now
mean,
that
it
I
doesn't
think about it,
fit
you might
because
have
the
a
movie.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah, because Vulcan's still there in
yeah,
Discovery,
yeah.
but so is young Spock. So yeah, but
You
he's
see,
an
that's the
adult. He's not a
problem.
boy.
Kelvin timeline was such a goddamn mistake, and when
Oh yeah.
that's classic Jar Jar. Oh, I'm gonna do my thing. Oh, I'm a real fan. No, you're not. You're a fake fan of
Well,
every.
that's what I'm saying. None of the timeline actually lines up with anything. It's all over the
Yeah,
fucking
Yeah. Oh
place.
yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
and that's I think that is your main point of this. But they wanted to try and tell us, oh, this is prime timeline. This is the real thing. It never was going to be. It was never going to be because it was rejected immediately. Nobody wanted this as a prequel to TOS. Still, from a cinematic visuals to its heavy serialized story, it had a similar feel to the films. Now, I'm not against serialization because I liked it in DS9, but this is, from what I know, it was a disaster
I
because the
don't think
character's
that
terrible.
this. Yeah, I don't think Discovery ever addressed the fact that the NCC 1701 was still using, you know, paper in their printers.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
uh, yeah. Yeah, I love that. The biggest complaint about the movies was how they lacked the spirit of the shows. How about they lacked any relevancy or respect for Star Trek or logic of Star Trek? I'm sorry, teleporting from a planet, transporting from a planet to the Enterprise, which is in warp. How far away? 9 plus. That was the dumbest thing in the goddamn world. I don't care how much of a genius Scotty is. No, retarded. So retarded.
If anybody could have figured that out, it would have been Scotty. But like he'd have to sit down for like fucking weeks to figure that shit out.
The
At
physics.
least.
The Enterprise was long gone in Jar Jar Land. It was long gone. You're not
Also,
transporting with that distance. It's stupid.
so even then, like you're transporting to a specific set of coordinates in space time, while the Enterprise, which is at warp,
Yeah,
is not staying at that specific set of coordinates in
exactly.
space time. So at the very least, you're getting left behind in empty space. At the worst, you're getting your atoms scattered across the fucking universe.
Because you have to actually the whole thing about transporter technology for the non deep nerd engineers is it's literally breaking you apart, saving your data in the computer, and then rebuilding you. That's how
Right.
transporters
In a
work.
stationary location.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So the way I equate it is, I mean, try jumping onto a moving freight train. It's about the same effect.
hmm
You end up
So
fucked.
it's just it's ridiculous. All right. The first season of Discovery, however, also ran. Oh, sorry, Mr. Sentence there. Specifically, the hopeful and aspiration quality of humanity's future. You mean, isn't STD all about women yelling at men? Isn't that part of its core?
Unless they're gay.
Yeah, or black and gay. I don't know. Uh,
So what they do for that instead is that they kill off one of the gay men, and then they resurrect him with some bullshit involving space fungus, and then he cries about it and is super pissy with the guy who he was gay with because he's alive again.
I think I'm dumber for having heard that.
Yeah, I had to watch it.
Oh my god. The first season of Discovery, however, also ran counter to that. The inciting incident in Starfleet's first mutiny, led by Mikey Burnham, as it kicks off the War of Klingons. Isn't she famous for doing everything wrong and being promoted for it?
Pretty much. Yeah,
Does she?
that's exactly what happens. Like she gets her captain killed because she goes against orders and she ends up starting a war that lasts for the entire first fucking season with the Klingon goddamn empire, who, as we all know, take to that sort of shit as like fish to water. And I mean, she's responsible for a lot of death,
Yeah,
a lot of it.
she is the
And so
Grim
that,
Reaper.
yeah, they actually put her in on a transport to prison in like the first or second episode because she started a fucking war and she went against orders. She got her captain killed and a bunch of other fucking people right out of the gate. And then, the ship that she's being transported on gets destroyed. Or somehow her cell survives and the force fields that keep it intact are still working. So she's just kind of floating in space until somebody comes along, finds her, and rescues her. Which I don't know. You guys know a thing or two about space and dimensions,
Yeah.
and how big and extremely improbable that would be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not like there was a black box attached to the cell, but
That's why when we get to Space Seed, that's why it's such a great episode because the randomness of finding the Botany
yeah.
Bay
But
is just
so she gets rescued by Lorca on the Discovery, and he's like, "Yeah, so we've been at war for weeks. It's your fault, and I'm going to put you to work."
all right. It
And
didn't
it just
matter.
she keeps failing up from there. Yeah,
I know, and getting people killed and being girl boss,
and crying. She cries a lot.
she
She
cries.
makes Ash Ketchum look like downright stoic.
Oh wow! But she's got the SJW haircut in those first couple seasons and attitude to go with it. So hey, she can be brave, bold, and black. I guess. Yeah, I said it. It didn't matter that this war was part of the establishment canon because fans felt it was too dark for Star Trek. We just explained why it was crap. Of course, if it had been like Stranger Worlds or previous series, fans likely would have complained it was too similar to a fuck you. Fuck you. It's that same old, oh, you nerds are never going to be happy with anything. You're not, yeah, to an extent, yes, we're always going to find something to nitpick, but when something works, our nitpicks are loving nerd nitpicks.
Yeah.
It's not ripping apart the show. All I've ever heard when it comes to STD is tearing apart its structure, its framework, its inability to actually get Star Trek right. I've never heard the nitpicks like we were doing at the end of Picard season 3, where we're going, maybe, what do you like pump action phaser and stuff like that. We it was the nerd nitpicking. We're having a good time. We're talking about the show. Nobody's having a good time talking about STD except the disco tards. Those are the only ones who are having a good time, and they're mentally deficient.
I'm gonna start calling them the cephaloids.
Therefore, to say you nerds are never going to be happy, that's that fake nerd or the condescending person who's standing on high going, oh, you nerds need to be guided correctly to understand your shows that you love so much. Let us tell
Obviously,
you. Obviously,
they don't understand what a nerd is. Nerds nitpick. Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah. We're salty. We're cranky. We're going to find something to be annoyed by. We're never going to universally love something. But in the end, we're still all fans of it. And we're going to have a nerd fight or two. But once we get it out of our system, we're okay. Ugh.
It's like remember that everybody remembers Galaxy Quest, when the kids who are like, what's his name? The kid who helps him at the end.
Yeah, who knows everything.
He walks up to him. He says, now, how does this? And he starts to ask him a question about the ship when he's all pissed off. That's what we do. Nerds will sit there and they'll try to figure shit out because they're so passionate about it that's what you do when you're passionate about something. You want to learn about it. You want to understand it. You want to think. That comes from a good place, not a bad place. But with the modern, cinema and stuff, that's what they think. You actually trying to figure the shit out is somehow, you just have to accept what we do, consume it, and then consume the next thing we bring up.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, they view that shit like a war crime. It's just like, how dare you find a flaw in my seemingly flawless plan? You will never be happy. You must enjoy my thing. It's like, no, I don't.
I'm Shakespeare in this. Love what I write.
Even Shakespeare ripped shit off.
Yeah, but he was
constantly. Actually,
you're fucking Jerry Shakespeare, man.
The only choice the storytellers had to make was to do something wildly different. Unfortunately, the loudest voices were the ones criticizing the show for it. That's them insinuating the loudest was the minority. That's their insinuation, when in fact the majority despises this. Arguably, those fans judged the series too harshly. Disco was stepped on. Well, it was steeped. Sorry, steeped. I can read. I'm not Dermy. Was steeped with Star Trek lore, from the return of Mirror Universe to the introduction of Captain Pike, Spock, and the Enterprise season 2. Okay.
Oh no, Adam. They need an editor that says stepped.
Okay, you're right. I did say stepped. I corrected it myself because
you corrected it to the correct word, but they misspelled that. Yeah.
Garbage tier. Okay, good. See, I thank you, Samuel. I was.
This is CBR, the article, right?
Yeah. We're 3 hours in. I'm starting to be jelly here, so I'm making sure I'm not getting punch drunk. But here's the thing: introducing Mirror Universe, introducing Enterprise, Pike, Spock. That's damage control. First of all, Mirror Universe was season 1. That was their attempt to look like Star Trek nerds.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing: is that even in the old stuff, barring the original series, the Mirror Universe only ever comes into play when they're worried that the ratings are going to flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's be honest, TNG never did do Mirror Universe, did they? TNG ever did it?
I don't think they did. No, but
the closest we got was Worf jumping from alternate realities. That's the closest we ever got. Mm-hmm. To that, the only one now DS9 dove head first into Mirror Universe.
Yeah,
and they did it really well. Sexy Evil Kira was awesome.
I mean, yeah,
and And there's that famous scene of alternate reality Dax where Terry Farrell's just in that white shirt with no bra on, and it's just all there. It's all there for the glory.
Yeah, Kira was so horny.
Yeah.
She wanted
that
everything.
Kira, she was gay, but she wasn't averse to a little D. She went a little bit the other way too, but she was super gay.
I don't think she was
Yeah.
that particular about.
Yeah,
about,
she was all
about
over
who
it.
she
She was
was
all over the
fucking,
place,
as long
but
as she
she-
was fucking somebody.
But
She liked
remember,
Cisco's dick.
but remember when regular Kira crossed over, she wanted to do herself.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah,
kind of
because she was
creepy.
that woman was a straight up pervert.
Yeah.
She pulled a dermy.
Oh.
She was Dermy
No,
if Dermy
Dermy
was
runs away from
hot.
himself.
Wait, no. You just put the idea that Dermy would have sex with him, an alternate reality version of himself.
I think he's mentioned that. I think he's actually said that.
Oh my
He's
god.
asked us the question. He's all, "Would you do it with yourself? Is
no.
that gay?" Or I can't remember what he was talking about, but I was all, "Yeah, dude, it's very gay."
Yeah,
Oh
it somehow
my God.
manages
Well,
to be both masturbation and gay.
Was I kind of feel like I was there for that. Maybe I've purposefully blocked out
Blocked
that
it out.
memory. I don't know. And that has to be something if I memory hold it, because I like to remember everything. I wish I could memory hold a lot of things, but I can't. I feel like I've heard this part before. Oh my god damn it, Derby.
But in the case of in the case of Mirror Universe Kira, she wasn't gay per se. She just wasn't picky.
She was
really
a sexual
horny.
deviant. Let's just say that she was
Yeah.
a sexual deviant. Anyway, yeah, no. So Mirrorverse was, attempt to pretend to be fans, and rest of that stuff. That's damage control to try and say, oh look, we like Star Trek. Look, here's stuff and all that's doing is then butchering stuff From short treks, which I remember being universally despised by everybody, to Strange New Worlds, the adventures of Mikey Burnham and the USS Discovery crew brought Star Trek back with stunning visuals and the moral and political dilemmas the franchise know for. Oh, no, I'm sorry. And this is the common mistake that these far left assholes make when they break this down. Original Trek brings you the entire argument from both sides, and then leaves it
And
to
they
you
don't tell you which one's right or wrong. They let you
leave it
decide.
to you.
Yeah.
Exactly. STD,
Also,
it's all far left, and everybody who disagrees with them is evil.
yeah. Also, in terms of the what did it say? It said the stunning visuals. I mean, I'm sure they would have been if they turned the fucking lights on.
It's garbage tier CGI too. It's nothing
you know,
special.
I mean, maybe turn the lights on a little bit. Maybe dial down the lens flare.
Oh God.
You know, it could have been pretty, but it was hard to see anything except lens flare.
Well, it's Kurtzman, and who is his big daddy? Jar Jar. Where am I? Lost my place. It just stretched out over a season without the high quality work of the right. Oh my God. I've heard about the writing quality of this, the high quality work of the writers, directors, and performers on Discovery. Paramount might have given up altogether. Newsflash: they have given up. I've heard that seasons 3 through 4, the budget was nothing. They gave them no money because they knew they had a stinker, but they probably had a contract with freaking Bad Reboot that they couldn't get out of it, and Kurtzman wanted to keep doing it.
Yeah,
Them canceling season
Kurtzman
5
got set up pretty nice for himself there. They you know, he's going to be making money on this in perpetuity, and there's nothing anybody can do to fucking put a stop to that. I will give the writers, and in particular the writers who actually researched anything, a little bit of credit. While I do think that the idea of the special drive that the Discovery has that allows it to traverse the mycelial network or whatever is kind of dumb. A lot of the stuff they talked about in terms of the mycelial network and about how spores actually work and stuff is based in real science. There is a wild fucking rabbit hole that you could go down and about how fungus works and exists and moves through the known universe and parts unknown. That is absolutely based in real world science. And I will give them credit for at least looking into that. But where they went with it was fucking retarded.
Oh, okay. All right, and now here's where we get. Here comes the politics of it. And Legatus, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about that. If they had to sell stuff, I have no idea. Discovery was hampered by bad faith criticism. While some fans legitimately brushed up against some Star Trek Discovery storytelling, the series was also met with bad faith critique. Despite Star Trek always being woke, go
Bullshit.
fuck yourself. That is the cop out argument they always make. It was always woke. No, it wasn't progressive. Yes, but we already told you it gave all points of view, and it
Look,
let you the viewer make
here's the
decisions.
difference, right? Progressive ideals, yes, obviously it embodied a lot of the ideals that Roddenberry himself had and that he wished to see. He obviously had a utopic vision for humanity, which unfortunately can never happen. But
No.
it's like the man was looking forward. He was trying to come up with ideas that would literally better everybody, not just in Fantasyland and whatnot. But the thing is the difference between his progressive ideals being obviously saturated throughout Star Trek and woke is that woke beats you over the head with it until you fucking agree or die.
And also, this is classic progressivism where you're just trying to move society for a little bit, not the hijacked version that we got in the 90s and the 2000s that became the far left woke movement we have now.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
Roddenberry allowed for disagreement. He allowed for dissension. He allowed for free will.
Yep.
This doesn't.
Yeah. So again, this is the hackneyed, lame, undefendable argument that Star Trek was always woke. So that's bullshit. The usual suspects on here we go. The usual suspects on social media and YouTube. That would be us, who they're referring to. Us, our sphere of YouTube. Thank you. Lamented at the diverse cast, empowered whammons, and long overdue inclusion of Alphabet Mafia characters. All right.
Bull crap.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Diverse. We already had a black captain. Girl captain. We've already had those. We have no problem with that. It's when you force feed it into bad characters and then sit there and say you have to love these characters because of that. You have to love her because she's a woman. You have to love her because she's black, and you have to love her because this and that. You can't. That's the difference. But to sit there and say that somehow we were all like, Cisco being black makes him weak. Bullshit. He's one of the best captains.
He's by the time you get to season 3 and he's Captain Cisco and he goes from Cisco with hair to Hawk from Spencer for Hire. I loved it when that happened. When he became Hawk from Spencer for Hire, I knew I was about to be in for a wild ass ride. I knew things were really going to pick up then. If you guys don't remember Avery Brooks, huh?
Yep.
Oh yeah, no, we remember Avery Brooks has been around in cinema and television for a long time.
Yeah, he was with on Spencer for Hire as the Hawk, badass Hawk, carried a big ass gun, kicked a ton of ass. Oh, so Spencer, my man. Oh, Avery Brooks is badass. When he went Hawk, I knew they had figured it out on DS9. That's when I knew they'd figured it out, and I realized, here we go.
Avery Brooks is the only reason I watched American History X the first time. As it turns out, it's a very good movie. But that he's why I watched it.
Yeah, and Avery Brooks became a fantastic anchor for the show. That's why these shows succeed. That's why TOS succeeds, because Shatner was the anchor and he nails it. TNG succeeds because Patrick Stewart was the anchor, held it together, got it forward, and Avery Brooks became the anchor and got DS9 on it going because you liked Cisco. Cisco became a badass. I'm not Picard. Boom! We'll punch Q in the face.
You hit me. Picard never hit me.
Yeah, I mean that he is his own captain, and it's
he's
great.
not just his own captain though. I mean, he's a single father, but he's a good father. Right?
Yes.
He cares about the people under his command. He cares about Bajor. He even, to a lesser extent, obviously, because they're the bad guys for the first part of the series, cares about the Cardassian people. He's a good man who is, excuse me, forced into some very difficult situations.
especially because he's not a particularly religious man, and he's becomes a major religious icon for the Bajoran people, which he resists forever. But eventually, he comes to love it, and not being a religious icon, but he comes to love the Bajoran culture, and he accepts it, and he's happier for it because it brings a wealth of love into his life and appreciation for good things, especially during the middle of a horrible war that ensues. And that
You know,
Cisco was fantastic.
you remember that episode where him and Jake took some time off and they built that
The sail,
solar glider?
solar sail, yeah.
And I mean,
Yep.
that was just an episode about a father and a son on a sailing trip. And it was really good.
DS9 managed to do a lot of things better that I wish that TNG had done. Take those throwaway single episodic moments of episodes that have nothing to do with anything else and just give us a fun episode. One of my favorite ones is when Bashir gets trapped in his favorite spy holodeck with everybody else in there and they all get reprogrammed. I love that episode because it's just something fun. And that's what I had wished they had done on TNG. I kind of wish that the whole Moriarty thing with Data hadn't become a giant threat to the Enterprise. I wish it had just been Data on a Sherlock Holmes adventure. All right, Bug, you got to bounce?
Yeah, I got like 15 minutes anyways.
All right. All right. Yeah. All right. Anytime we can go. That's fine. Once we're done with this article, we're gonna wind down anyway. We're over the 3-hour mark. We have gone down the many rabbit holes. All right. So this is all bullshit. And again, the favorite thing. Oh, long overdue alphabet representation. I'm just gonna insist, Riker. I love you. To the asexual people.
Yep.
I all over the place. Beverly having to, when we first get introduced to the Trills, being to decide, can I love you? Do I love the symbiote or do I love the person? I mean, separate. Or when Dax gets reunited with people from her past host lives. So passionate. It's everywhere. But no, these people never watch this shit. Never watched.
Well, and none of it's interesting. I mean, you remember that time that Dax found out that there was an eighth life, that eighth life was a fucking serial killer.
Yeah, and even though it's then an Ezri episode later when she has to tap into that to
stop the other killer.
Yeah, to stop another killer
with the gun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or even going to Voyager, there was an episode of where. Oh, now I can't remember his name. The guy who played Green and Wormtongue and is the voice of Chucky.
I know. Yeah, when they
So he played Brad Dourif. He plays a Betazoid, a full blood Betazoid, mind you, fully telepathic, who is also a serial killer. And Tuvok mind melts with him to figure out what's wrong with him, and it fucking affects him. Right, he becomes more like the killer. Or
you have a great sociological episode when what's her name, the engineer on Voyager, B'Elanna, when Torres gets pregnant in the final season, and she's so against her Klingon heritage, she starts genetically modifying her child because they discover that it's going to have a spinal problem, so they correct it. But then the doctor says, "Oh, we can correct other things," and she starts trying to remove all the Klingon DNA because of her own bad past experiences being a half breed. That's a great study of be proud of who you are. Don't shy away just because you look different. It's not a curse. It could be. It's something good. These things. It's all right there.
Right,
for their diversity and bullshit.
The moral implications of doing that kind of thing to the unborn, of tampering with genes, of designer kids.
Yeah.
I mean, it touched on a lot of stuff, and these were great stories.
And when you do that, the old school Trek fans going to start thinking about the eugenics wars, because that was eugenics. That's the altering of DNA to make a superior man.
which was 100% outlawed after the fact, which is why Bashir ended up, well, partially because they didn't think
Man.
that Bashir was that interesting, but they added in this thing about him that
And it made him more interesting.
it did.
One of my favorite moments is once it's revealed and him and Miles always play darts. It's basically, okay, you got to go stand over there now when we're playing darts. You have to go stand 10 yards back when we're doing this. Because we learned that for 5 years, Bashir had been holding back. He'd been throwing matches. I mean, this is what Star Trek's about. It's not about your fucking diversity inclusion. It's not about your representation, your whammons. It's not about that. It was already there. And if you talk about like it wasn't there, it means you never watched it and you don't know Star Trek.
Star Trek wrote good characters. New Trek only has caricatures.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we were just talking about it. Let's go back here. They talk about talking about TOS, the half black, half white stuff, blah blah. It was already there. It was already there. I still those who accuse the show of being too dark may have been onto something. Star Trek always reflects the present day. Here it comes. We got to modernize it. Bullshit. You don't timeless for a reason. All right. We're done with this. This is all bullshit. They're trying to defend the show. We have shown you how indefensible their point is. We've shown you these people do not respect Star Trek. They don't understand it. All Kurtzman saw was a vehicle for their agenda, and a vehicle in Kurtzman's case also to make himself rich on the back of something that he didn't build and he didn't improve. Because that's one thing you can say. Yes, Gene Roddenberry was alive when TNG started, but he died halfway through. He died when they were releasing the Spock episodes, and I remember when it came up in loving memory of Gene Roddenberry. I was like, oh shit, he died? Because I was a kid. I didn't have access to media. I didn't know Gene Roddenberry died. You know, oh shit, Gene Roddenberry died. He was there. But then the people who were left, and again, to say that we missed the days of Brandon Braga and everyone there, those who left, they still understood the spirit, and they carried on.
In no small part to Major Roddenberry, when she
Yes.
stuck around and she made sure they stayed on task.
Yeah. Major Barrett Roddenberry was a huge force in keeping it on there. And I will say this unashamedly, every season, whenever it was a Loaxana episode, always a favorite episode. Always love a Loaxana episode. They were always good. Always a lot of fun.
Poor Odo. She just Herbert too.
Yeah.
That was touching at the end, though.
Yeah.
It was very.
But either way, it was carried on until those who did it weren't there anymore. And then you have the Kurtzman era, the bad reboot spawn, and the identity politics, the agenda-driven assholes who come in and see this nothing but a vehicle to push their activism crap on people who aren't asking for it, on people who are just wanting to sit down, watch some Star Trek, and be entertained. All right, I'm done. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you'd like to reach out to me, please email me at therarenerd@gmail.com for all channel business purposes. I am on Twitter now, mostly for promotion and sharing of videos, maybe a little shit stirring here and there, who knows, @TheRenNerd. You can also find me at the Geeks and Gamers forums under @ROAS, and you can see me on Rumble and Odyssey under the Renaissance Nerd. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy.